Greetings, Skyborn, and welcome to Active Player Network, where today we are going to start our exploration of Overlight, a new RPG setting from Renegade Game Studios. Designed by Paul Alexander Butler and George Holland, Overlight can be described as a kaleidoscopic fantasy RPG. Now, what that means is that you're not going to see the same orcs, elves, dwarves that you might see in a more traditional high fantasy role-playing setting. What you will, however, get is sort of a rules-light core mechanic that will help you focus on driving the narrative forward and not worrying so much about getting bogged down in rules. So, what is Overlight? What is this world that we're talking about? Well, it consists of 7 different continents called Shards that all float in space over an infinite sea. Of course, you don't want to let yourself get bogged down in science here. This is kaleidoscopic fantasy, fools! Leave it at the door! Dive in! The first shard is Nova. This is comprised of rocky towers and sand-blasted expanses covered in mesas. These are inhabited by sentient centipedes who are contemplating their existence. Next, you have Zenith, which is covered in violet mountains that are topped with snow and populated by human monks and their ape-like companions, Hamanu. Next up, we have Quill. Quill is covered in a jungle landscape and just writhing with all sorts of rivers that crash around the shard, and it's home to this kind of tattered remains of a small reptilian race. Then there's Banyan, and Banyan is home to a deciduous forest and lots of symbiotic folk. Then, of course, there's Hark, and Hark is basically a shard that's completely covered in a sprawling city known for trade and commerce. It is the largest of the 7 shards and is home to humans. There's Vale, which I like to imagine with a name like the Amber Paradise, that it has kind of constant magic hour lighting all over it, lots of green inland estates and meadows, lagoons to look over. Let's go on vacation. So what you have are, of course, these 7 shards, and they're kind of stacked, floating above each other in space. So at the very bottom, you have Pyre, and Pyre is mostly cast in darkness, but all across it you see volcanic ranges and steppes and veins of hot magma coursing across the crust of the earth there. Travel between these shards is mostly uncommon, but it can be managed. There are great mist rays, there are bejeweled dragonflies and pyroi warbats that are able to take folk between the different shards when desired. Now, of course, when we think of our solar system, we think of a central point, the sun, and then how everything rotates around it. And that's really not the case with Overlight. Here, you have this mysterious source of light, the Overlight above, and then the stacked shards below. And what that means is that as they float, they can be passing beneath each other, and they go into a state called Under the Shadow. 3,000 years before the campaign setting begins, humans did something terrible that caused the entire set of continents to crack apart and create the shards. The term Overlight actually refers to the refracted light that comes from above, right? And it is actually the Skyborn, the characters that we play at the table, who are able to mold and manipulate Chroma from this light source to create their abilities. Each of these chromas is, because it's refracted light, associated with a color and a shard and a virtue that is well known to the people who tend to inhabit that shard. So the white chroma is the color of spirit, or the soul. This is actually simultaneously all colors and none at all. The purple shard is wisdom and is basically associated with the Zenith shard, the monks and the Hamanu, and this refers to instinct and the sort of compass of the mind. How do you think the way that you do? The blue chroma is a little bit different from purple because it is specifically connected to logic, and it is the chroma associated with Quill. The green chroma is associated with Banyan, which is all about empathy and connection, sympathy, and sort of the symbiotic relationship with all living things and that kind of connection with the rest of the cosmos. Next up, we have the yellow chroma, which is actually associated with the shard of Hark. And what this is connected to is sheer force of will, your desire to see your own will prevail over those around you. Then we have the orange chroma. This is most succinctly characterized by vigor. This is speed, agility, hunger, heat, people gathering together, people celebrating. That is what the orange chroma represents. And lastly, of course, we have the chroma associated with the lowest shard of Pyre. That is the red chroma. This is associated with physical might, the virtue of war, and the purity of physical presence. All right, active players, it's time to get folked. And by folk, I'm referring to the different creatures you can choose between to embody in your game of Overlight. Get your head out of the gutter. From the Shard of Quill, we have Tyrexians, and this type of folk is actually the only one to have wings. It is the only one with the power of flight. They are known for their keen minds and are often depicted as scholars or tutors in their original habitat. From Banyan, we have, surprise, the Benyari folk, who are actually as varied as the types of living creatures and vegetation you might find in a jungle. They can be anything from walking two-trunked trees to amphibious creatures that live partially in mud landscapes and then walk out on a grassland. They're actually known for their incredible storytelling, some of which is rumored to have magical properties. But as incredibly varied as each Benyari might be, all of them worship their hearthwood trees that are scattered across the shard. On the snow-capped mountains of Zenith live two types of folk who exist in perfect harmony with one another. First, we have the human Zenith order of monks, and then living atop the mountains, the ape-like Hamanu. Next up, we have the Harkin, who are from, spoilers, Hark. Now, what this means is that these are humans, and as varied as planet Earth is in terms of cultures and origins and behavior, so too are the Harkin of this shard and in their sprawling urban society. One thing that you need to know when choosing to play a Harkin is that they are often led to believe that they are undeserving of their place in the Seven based on their contribution to the splitting of the Shards 3,000 years ago. Hailing from the paradise of Vale, you will find the masked Arumel, whose goal is simply to last. It is their drive to see their identity, their artisanship in poetry, blacksmithing, any kind of craft passed down along with their identity from one to the next in their generation. Last up, we have the mighty Pyroi from Pyre. These gargantuan humanoids are known for their brass or bronze skin and their whiteless eyes that glow with embers of red or gold or copper. And of course, they are typically associated with the red chroma for physical might. Well, folks, I believe that will cover it for our overview of Overlight Cosmology. We want to hear from you. Which of the folk do you want to try playing in your Overlight campaign? Type that right down there in the comments. You can find us on Facebook at Active Player Network, on Instagram at Active Player Network, and on Twitter at Active Player Net. You can go ahead and subscribe and like this video on YouTube to make sure that you don't miss another thrilling adventure. See you next time. Bye, guys.